Next up in our SEC preview series is the Texas A&M Aggies, heading into the first season of the Mike Elko era, his first year as head coach coming over from Duke, man. It was kind of a rocky road for Texas A&M last year, right? An 11-11 record over the last 2 years for Jimbo Fisher. He was fired in November. That netted a $77.5 million buyout. That is record-shattering for a buyout. So Texas A&M very much was willing to pay whatever it took to get Jimbo Fisher out of there. They then hired Mike Elko, who actually was Jimbo Fisher's defensive coordinator at Texas A&M before taking that Duke job. He did a great job at Duke, man, of having them punch above their weight class. They had a 16-9 record under Mike Elko. They were 5-18 in the 2 years before Mike Elko. So it's kind of the opposite of Jimbo Fisher, where Jimbo Fisher brought in these super highly ranked recruiting classes. In fact, the greatest recruiting class we've ever seen in 2022 when they brought in, I believe, 8 5-stars total, which has never happened before. But they didn't develop those players. Mike Elko is the opposite, where he doesn't get these highly rated recruiting classes, but they always punch above their weight class. And I think A&M's hoping that with more talent now, they can join the big boys in college football. And they have some talent on defense to work with, and obviously Connor Weigman, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think their biggest strength, Dalton, is that defense. They have really no holes on defense. Even though they lost Walter Nolan, their D tackle to Ole Miss, is still really set up really well at all three levels, at D-line, linebacker, and then secondary. Really a big part of that was the addition of Nick Scorton, who's one of the best edge defenders in the country, coming in from Purdue. And we'll talk about him in a little bit, but I think that's their biggest strength. The weakness for them, I think, is the interior offensive line, which they're really strong at offensive tackle, but the interior is a little questionable. All three of their projected starters on the interior earned sub-65 grades last year. Chase Basantis and Mark Naboo Jr. Will be changing positions. And the third guy they have starting the interior is a transfer from Kansas in Armaj Reed-Adams, who wasn't great at Kansas either. Now he's going to the SEC. So the interior offensive line is a little questionable for, I think, Texas A&M. I think that's one of their big weaknesses that they got right now. But, Dalton, what is the Connor Weigman getting a lot of hype right now. Right now is the number one quarterback in the draft, according to PFF's lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema. Do you agree with that hype, or what did you see with Connor Weigman when you dove into him?
There's certainly a lot of things to like. I don't think right this minute, based on the sample, that I would have him QB1. I really like Shedeur Sanders, but Carson Beck I might put ahead of him also. I get it with Weigman. Like, there are some things that he does really, really well. He's an ex-baseball player. He came to A&M to try to play both, and then, okay, dude, you're playing football, right? Look, NFL arm, for sure. Absolutely. The deep ball floats a little bit, but when you talk about generating velocity, absolutely an NFL arm. Definitely a good athlete. I wouldn't call him an A-plus athlete, like not a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or something like that, but a good athlete who can definitely get on the move and throw on the move. I just think we still have a really small sample on him, right? Like, you look at the highlights, and especially, throwing over the middle of the field, one of the best in the country. Absolutely. Like, he's just has this thing. There's probably nobody that throws a 15-yard in route better than Connor Weigman. He's got the tools. He's got the arm strength. You would have loved to have seen him play the full year last year, right? Because he got into the first SEC game against Auburn, and it was kind of like a mediocre half of football, and then I believe he broke his foot, and he was done for the year. So it's hard to say. Like, last year's numbers and grades look great, right? Like, I see he's got the second-best intermediate grade in the country last year behind Bo Nix. Well, the bulk of his work, though, was against New Mexico and Louisiana Monroe, who are like two of the 10 worst defenses in the entire country, right? If you got to play teams like that all year, you're probably going to win a Heisman Trophy. So, a decent game against Miami in a loss, kind of rattled against Auburn before he came out of the game. And you just look at him and you go, the one thing I do look at that I like from last year's 4 games is his delivery looked just a lot cleaner, a lot more like a quarterback. I think you go back to his freshman year when he played, I believe it was 5 or 6 games, and it looked like a baseball player throwing. The posture was kind of off. If the throws weren't down the middle right in front of him, it was a little off. Like, throws to the outside towards the numbers are a little more difficult for him. This is going to be a very, very, very watched evaluation, right? Just his tape is going to be watched more than almost any other player, because the arm is there. You can see it. And you talk about making perfect vertical throws and throws in the intermediate middle of the field. He can do that. Expand the game, stay healthy for a whole year, keep working the delivery, right? Again, you could see it was a little bit tighter last year. It was better, right? And we were getting there. the two big questions for me are the development off the foot injury and just not getting to play last year, coming back healthy. And he did lose Jimbo Fisher, who for about 15 to, if not 20 years, has been a quarterback whisperer, right? You talk about Christian Ponder, first-round pick. E.J. Manuel, first-round pick. Jameis Winston, number one pick. Kellen Mond at A&M, is still, I think, floating around in the NFL as a backup at least. Like, you go from Jimbo Fisher to Colin Klein now as your offensive play caller. It's a big difference. It's Jimbo was more traditional, pocket passer, that sort of thing. Colin Klein, as well, even when he was playing, he was a little strange, and even at Kansas State, it's a different style of football, right? So I think Weigman's going to be a fun evaluation as the season goes on. I wouldn't have him QB1 yet until we see it, but I get the tools that we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of his guys is really going to be helpful in keeping him healthy, hopefully, next year, which is something he couldn't do last year, is Trey Zune III, who is their starting left tackle, has been the starting left tackle in each of the last 2 years. Really shined as a pass blocker, man. 77.2 pass blocking grade in 2023. That was 6th among SEC tackles. Was also the 5th highest graded tackle in the SEC at 75.7. He has ideal length for position, man. He is 6'7", and I think he's one of the 10 best returning offensive tackles that we have in college football right now. So Trey Zune III at left tackle for Texas A&M. I mentioned before how the interior offensive line is a little questionable. Their tackles are in a great spot next year. So I'm not really selling on the offensive line too much because I think their tackles are really, really good. So Trey Zune III is definitely the star of that offense besides Connor Weigman, I think.
Yeah. They look good on the edges on offense, and they look really good on the edge on defense, and that's because of a Purdue transfer, Nick Scorton, man, our number 2 edge player in the country coming into this year. And you talk about a guy, I'll tell you what, when he plays with the right amount of leverage and violence, he reminds me a lot of Jared Verse, and maybe even a more athletic Jared Verse. Got a spin move out of this world, 21.3% pass rush win rate last year, which was 9th among all edge defenders. Solid in run defense, maybe a little less consistent than he is in the pass rush, but still a solid player. This guy's what you look for in an outside linebacker. Again, I think if he plays with a little more violence, the finesse is all there. If he plays with a little more violence, I do see a very similar player to Jared Verse, who went top 20 in this past draft.
Absolutely, man. He's a superstar, and I think he could be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft as well. All right, bottom line time now, Dalton. First year of the Mike Elko era. Obviously going 7-6 last year, very disappointing for Texas A&M, but they have talent, man. And Mike Elko, like I said before, has consistently had his teams punch above their weight class, so now you give them a pretty talented team. What should the expectation be for the Aggies in 2024?
They're a weird one. They're kind of this weird X Factor team, right, where I think between their defensive talent and the way Elko coaches it, they're going to be good on defense. Like, that's not going into A&M, going into the 12th man down there and trying to score on them is not going to be an easy or a fun task. It really comes down to Weigman. I mean, honestly, if Weigman is QB1 or if he's like a top 3 or 4 QB, like some people, like a lot of people now think he is, you've got a team that maybe is a dark horse playoff type of team in the SEC. But that's what it comes down to. Is him? Is he decent? Is he overhyped? Is he QB1? Like, which direction are we going with Connor Weigman? I think sometimes it's too simple to say, yeah, it's the quarterback, but with this team, it kind of is, especially with him coming off the injury and going into a new offense.
Yeah, I think you look at their schedules, it's about an average SEC schedule, still a top 20 schedule in the country. They have a big game against Notre Dame week 1, which is actually pretty fun because Elko's quarterback at Duke, Riley Leonard, is now the quarterback at Notre Dame, and Elko, of course, is now the coach at Texas A&M. So if he might know exactly how to play against Riley Leonard from knowing him for so long. So that's going to be a really interesting chess match in week 1 at Texas A&M, by the way. They host Missouri later on in the season. They host LSU, and they are hosting Texas too. So all their big, I'm looking at this right now, all their big games are at Texas A&M, at Kyle Fields. That's kind of interesting. When one of the best environments in college football, they host so many big games. I think this could be like an 8-4, 9-3 type team, Dalton. I don't know if they're going to fully become like a playoff contender, but the way that Elko has done a great job at Duke, I think he could do a really good job immediately at Texas A&M, especially if Connor Weigman can live up to the hype that Trevor Sikkema and so many others have put on him right now. And like I said before, the biggest issue for Jimbo Fisher wasn't getting talent; it was developing the talent. That's the opposite of Mike Elko, man. Mike Elko's biggest issue at Duke was he wasn't able to get top talent. Now he's got it. He developed it really well. I think there are some questions on the interior offensive line and in the receiving core at Texas A&M, but other than that, man, I think they can make some serious noise with a great defense and potential first-round quarterback they have in Connor Weigman as well. So that's what we got for our preview of Texas A&M heading into 2024. Again, we're doing this for every single one of the 70 Power 5 teams. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any single one of them.